Since the Biden-Xi meeting, would you say, based on your own knowledge, Mr. Barr, and the findings of this report, that the PRC has in any way meaningfully taken any steps to reduce the production of fentanyl precursors?
I'm not aware of any material steps that they've taken.
That was Kentucky Congressman Andy Barr questioning former Attorney General Bill Barr yesterday during a House hearing on the Chinese Communist Party and how it has funneled fentanyl through the U.S. wide-open border. The former Attorney General testified that President Biden's meeting with Xi Jinping has had little impact on getting China to stop the fentanyl flow. The Select Committee on China releasing a report accusing Beijing of manufacturing and exporting the materials used to make fentanyl and other synthetic drugs. The lawmakers charged the communist government is giving grants to companies involved in drug trafficking and offering tax rebates to fentanyl producers and exporters as long as they do not sell the product in China. We know that Senator Roger Marshall has told us about this months ago, actually. Joining me right now is Kentucky Congressman Andy Barr. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs and Financial Services Committee. He's also part of the China Select Committee. Congressman, what more can you tell us? The CCP working with the drug cartels, Roger Marshall said that the drug cartels are actually the secondary partner. It's actually the CCP leading this to ensure that these drugs get into America.
Yes, Maria, our investigation in the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition of China has uncovered a coordinated effort by the Chinese Communist Party to literally poison and murder over 100,000 Americans every single year. Kentucky, my home state, is the fourth highest overdose mortality rate state in the country. And so this is very personal to me. Fentanyl is responsible for over 70% of those fentanyl deaths. And what our investigation found is that 97% of all of the fentanyl precursors are manufactured and distributed from the People's Republic of China, exploiting our open southern border, coordinating with the cartels to flood our country with this deadly fentanyl. Only a tiny little bit of this fentanyl is very, very deadly, and it is the leading cause of death in the United States for Americans between 18 and 45. What we found is that not only does the Chinese Communist Party directly subsidize the manufacture and distribution and export of these precursors, but they refuse to prosecute any of these companies. They have ownership interest in these companies. And while they censor the domestic sale of drug precursors inside China, they openly allow e-commerce sites to distribute these drugs to foreign countries, including the United States.
I've got the report in front of me, actually, right now, and it is just stunning. Raises two obvious questions. If we know this is happening, why aren't we doing anything about it? And why are we acting as if everything is fine, sending Janet Yellen, Anthony Blinken, and everybody else to go meet their counterparts in China and never bringing this up?
Yes, this fentanyl scourge and the fentanyl war that is being waged against the American people by the Chinese Communist Party is just another example of the weakness of the Biden administration's foreign policy. Here, once again, is an example of the Biden administration chasing diplomacy, chasing upfront concessions, and begging the Chinese to help us on the fentanyl issue with no results. So, for example, at the APEC summit, the last Biden-Xi meeting, Biden gave upfront concessions and said, hey, we're going to delist this Institute of Forensic Science, a known human rights violator, on the Commerce Entity List. We're going to take the sanctions off of this notorious organization within China in exchange for cooperation down the road on fentanyl. And as the witnesses testified yesterday, nothing has been done. The Chinese have done nothing. They've accelerated their war using fentanyl against the United States. This foreign policy of weakness is literally killing Americans.
Is Joe Biden uninformed, inept, or compromised?
Well, ask my colleague from Kentucky, Jamie Comer, whether he's compromised. I think he's developing a pretty good record on that point. But what I would just say here right now is that setting aside the compromise and the corruption of the Biden family, This foreign policy is not working. There is no deterrence. And so what I am urging the administration to do, and what I'm urging the Senate to do, is take up my bill, the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act, which would impose tough sanctions on Chinese Communist Party officials at every level for not doing enough to stop the flow of these illegal fentanyl precursors into the United States.
Well,
that's what we need. As Attorney General Barr said yesterday, we need more sticks, less carrots.
Right. And we know that right now there are Chinese companies trading on U.S. exchanges, and American investors are buying those stocks, in effect funding the expansion of our number one adversary, the CCP. 40 huge publicly traded Chinese companies are responsible reportedly for keeping Iran a current going concern. They are held by nearly every large U.S. asset manager. Should those companies be removed from U.S. capital markets?
Yes, so Maria, we are working on legislation to deal with the outbound investment to protect American investors from unwittingly financing the Chinese Communist Party for human rights violations, for their military-industrial complex. We don't want Western capital flowing into China in ways that would actually enhance their malign activities. One thing I would say is that our advantage in the competition with China is that we are capitalists. And their disadvantage is that they are communists. They misallocate capital. And so we should be the best version of ourselves in this competition. We should enhance our position and our competitiveness with them. But certainly we need to create a green light, red light system that gives investors certainty and clarity about investments that are flowing into China that do compromise our national security.
Right. I'm just trying to understand why we have such vulnerability when it comes to national security. We've said it over and over again. It only took 19 terrorists to take down the World Trade Center. And yet we've got all of this happening under our noses, and there's been no change whatsoever, certainly not at the border. Since October of last year, there were more than 24,000 Chinese migrant southern border encounters. The majority of those crossings now happening in California. There were 135 in Arizona, 91 in Texas, and just 4 in New Mexico. Nearly all of the California crossings are happening in San Diego. And the total amount of Chinese border encounters this fiscal year already surpassed the last 3 years combined, Congressman. So what are these Chinese migrants doing? Why are they coming into America, getting apprehended? They're trying to not get detected. Again, the reason that I ask if Joe Biden is uninformed, inept, or compromised is because no one can understand how it is possible that we are allowing a wide open border to welcome terrorists, would-be terrorists, Chinese migrants who have their own plans to become saboteurs later, and thousands of pounds of fentanyl, which is being led by the Chinese Communist Party. And we're going over to China, sending all of our cabinet members and acting as if, going having beers, eating their mushrooms, whatever it is. I don't understand why. So is it uninformed, inept, or compromised?
All of the above. All of the above. This is why the American people have zero confidence in this administration. It is total incompetence. Perhaps it's the fact that they're compromised. But here's the bottom line. These Chinese nationals are, in fact, the largest group of illegal migrants crossing our southern border. There are more illegal Chinese nationals crossing our southern border in this fiscal year alone than the entire amount of Chinese nationals coming into our country from 2007 to 2020 combined. This should raise eyebrows. This should raise eyebrows for all of us. 24,000 in just the first 5 months of fiscal year 2024. For my constituents back home, that's the entire number of people that crowd into Rupp Arena for a Kentucky basketball game. Those are all Chinese nationals, military-age people coming into our country because we have no control over our southern border. It's outrageous.
So, Congressman, it is outrageous, and we all know it's outrageous. You're an elected official. What are you going to do about it? Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie is now joining Marjorie Taylor Greene, we believe. He's threatening to force a vote to oust House Speaker Mike Johnson over his foreign aid plan. Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene both calling for Johnson to resign because, again, you're talking about money to Ukraine, to Israel, to Taiwan. with no new security at the border. Why not?
Well, if you are a conservative, if you support Donald Trump for president, if you want to secure our southern border, the last thing you want to do, the most counterproductive thing you can do, the dumbest thing you could do is vacate the Speaker's office 6 months before the most consequential election in American history. Our Speaker is doing a great job, and he is the toughest border hawk in our entire conference. Speaker Johnson, under his leadership, is the one who brought H.R. 2. He is fighting for H.R. 2. He's the one who brought the impeachment against Mayorkas and successfully delivered it to the Senate, which is doing nothing. Speaker Johnson understands that we only control 1/3 of the government. But in order to deal with a very thin majority, when we don't have any help from the White House, we don't have any help from the Senate, you have to be tactical, you have to be smart, and we have to grow our majority. So this idea that somehow if we just vacate the speakership, we're going to secure the border, that is absurd. That is absurd. So I hope my colleagues who actually want to do something, who actually want to achieve border security, don't do this.
Congressman, real quick before you go, we're about 6.5 months away from the election. Should we just pray that in the next 6 months nothing happens until Donald Trump can take this up?
Well, look, we are very fortunate that we have very patriotic and effective Customs and Border Protection agents. Despite this administration, we have terrific law enforcement all across this country, and they're doing the best that they can under the circumstances. But the American people need to understand that our country is more vulnerable than ever before, and that is on Joe Biden. If you want to secure our country, if you want to make our country safe, we need new leadership in the White House.
Congressman, we'll be watching your work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Andy Barr in D.C. We'll be right back.